Your question, when did we get so much self-control to resist female beauty and charm? Your answer is constant bashing of our character since birth. Mom be like, don't hit girls, even if they hit you. Dad be like, respect women. Even when they have nothing to be respected, I have to respect them just because they are women. Teachers, both male and female, had severe bias towards girls, to the point they were lenient towards them in test. And we got deducted heavy marks just for minor mistakes. Just for being ourselves, we were shamed by the society and were told to shut up and apologize, while on the other hand, girls were inspired to behave like us and complimented to be brave warriors who will end the evil patriarchy. Everywhere in this society, from our family to school and colleges to video games, movies, social media, news everywhere, we were bashed, shamed, and neutered for being men. You can beat a workhorse so much until it dies. In this case, men have died. What is considered to be a man, our duties and obligations towards society have died. I could care less about women and society. Whether society can function without us or fail miserably is none of my business. I have had enough of the nonsense, and I will never let any women near me. It's done and dusted for me, and I sure for many guys in here. This was a comment on a recent video of mine that I'm sure really resonates with a lot of you out there. It really resonated with me, and I'm not even Gen Z. I'm a millennial who grew up just before all this gender war madness started. But even I noticed this happening from a very early age. Girls were universally more favored by teachers from kindergarten. I remember every time there was a problem or a conflict between two students, the teacher would automatically believe the girl every single time without exception. It got to a point where girls realized this and, of course, used and abused this to their advantage. It was a world where girls were inherently born perfect princesses who could do no wrong. Intergenerational conflict is nothing new. This Reddit post shows how from the beginning of human history, dating back thousands of years, older generations always like blaming younger ones for anything and everything. What is unique about the hatred towards Gen Z men, however, is that the hatred seems to be coming from all angles. Both liberals and conservatives have a bone to pick with Gen Z men. For liberals, the fact that you're a white guy is enough to hate you. Not much more needs to be said about that. For conservatives, they can't stand the fact that this generation of men is rebelling against tradition, refusing to be wage slaves and quitting society. It's quite telling that we are more polarized politically than ever. The right and left hate each other more than ever right now. Yet the one thing they can find common ground on is that they both hate young men. What they don't realize is that these behaviors from modern men are an adaptation to current times, not a proactive choice. What's even more ironic is they're the ones who screwed up the economy and created these horrible economic conditions where no one wants to work, then wonder why the younger generation doesn't want to work. The lack of self-awareness with these people is really astounding. The left is guilty of this as well. Make no mistake, many women were victims of horrible sexual trauma, which is what led to the Me Too era. But who was really responsible for that? Most of the allegations that sparked Me Too happened long before Gen Z came of age, some of them even long before Gen Z was born. Older generations of men were responsible for those heinous acts, but most of them are married off, or dead, or irrelevant by now. So this current hatred towards men inspired by the left doesn't even punish the actual culprit of the crime. They're only punishing a younger generation of men who had absolutely nothing to do with it. In fact, if I had to guess, given Gen Z men's unprecedented disinterest in women, they're probably the demographic of men that commits the least amount of sex crimes. The right blames you for problems that they caused. The left punishes you for crimes you had nothing to do with. Everyone from every corner seems to have an irrational, vicious hatred towards Gen Z men right now. But here's the cool part. You guys don't seem to give an F. Guilt, shame, and gaslighting are tactics that have been used throughout the millennia to get men to simp for women and for society, sacrificing all their own dignity and self-respect in the process. Men are called losers if they don't sacrifice their own health and well-being, working a job they hate to support a woman. Most recently, when I came of age as a millennial, we were brainwashed to believe we were privileged and had an easier life, and most of us believed this garbage. The current gender war going on is called a gender war only because Gen Z men started pushing back on this lunacy when they came of age. For millennials, it was more like a one-sided beatdown, where the blue-pilled society constantly told us we were horrible for no reason, and we just quietly nodded our heads in agreement. These tactics, however, no longer work on Gen Z men, and society is absolutely terrified of this. I'm not for constant conflict, and this whole gender war is pretty ridiculous at this point. But when someone is constantly putting you down and bullying you, you have to stand up for yourself and push back at some point. And this leads me back to the title and the whole point of the video. Why does everyone seem to hate Gen Z men so much? They claim it's about the Me Too stuff, or that men have been denying women positions of power. Even if that's true, it's not Gen Z men who did that. They were literally babies when most of these heinous acts against women happened. So these explanations just don't make sense. The real reason everyone hates Gen Z men so much is for the simple fact that they can't be gaslit, manipulated, and exploited like men of generations past. And here's the real ironic part. Women complained that men were toxic, men were pigs, men only wanted sex, men shouldn't approach them. So Gen Z men listened. Gen Z men are far and away the most disinterested generation when it comes to women. Most of them would rather play video games and aren't even looking for a relationship. And guess what? Now they're complaining that men don't approach anymore and don't put in effort anymore. Seriously, you can't win with these people. So now that we know what's going on, the question remains, what should you do about it? I can't predict the future and I don't know all the answers. But what I will say is I think you guys are absolutely on the right track. A lot of you guys are simply giving up on society, going on strike and doing what you enjoy. Older generations will tell you to just work harder and pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But here's the problem with that. If you get lucky, sure, you might find a good job. But that doesn't change the fact that there is only one of those good jobs available, and if you get that job, it by default means you have to kick someone else out of that job. In other words, that advice might work for you individually, but it can't solve the problem on a macro societal level. Let's say there are 100 jobs available in any given field. But with the way the economy is now, there's going to be several thousand people competing for said 100 jobs. If all those people pull themselves up by the bootstraps and work really hard, it's not going to create more jobs. It's just going to make it a lot more competitive and a lot harder to fight for those existing 100 positions. This happened with millennials in college. We were brainwashed to believe college was a guaranteed ticket to success. So there was a huge push from all our parents to send all of us to college. The idea was that we would all get good jobs once we graduated. But what actually happened was, since everyone had a degree itself was no longer anything special, and we were just saddled with a bunch of student loan debt. When you combine that with the fact that universities generally just hate young men now, like everyone else, I wouldn't really recommend going to college at this point. The only way really to improve things beyond an individual level is what you guys are doing now, going on strike and refusing to participate in society until they eventually will realize they need to listen to you. This is actually as peaceful and civilized of a protest as it gets. So this is how you can actually impact change on a macro level. But what about on an individual level? As a millennial, when I think about the challenges I faced as a young man compared to the challenges you guys face today, I always try to take a fair and objective approach. One thing I hated about my boomer parents was them constantly shoving down my throat how much harder they had it in the past, with this simplistic mentality that everything gets better over time. It's not that simple. There are certain things that are easier for you guys today, but there were also certainly things that were easier in my day as well. For example, my early adulthood was mostly defined by the 2008 financial crisis, which made it next to impossible to find a job. But at least food and rent prices were quite reasonable back then. I remember with my first roommate, we rented out a relatively nice and spacious $600 per month apartment, which we split for only $300 each in rent per month. These days, rent literally costs 10 times as much in some places, and no matter how much the government lies about the statistics, we all know wages didn't go up by nearly as much in the same amount of time. So I definitely try to understand your struggles and won't claim things were so much harder back in my day. Here's where your generation has a huge advantage, however. You guys have way more information and opportunities to live alternative lifestyles these days. Whether that's traveling abroad, living in a van, starting a YouTube channel, or investing in the stock market. These alternative lifestyles were much less accessible back in my day. I still found a way to do them because I realized the traditional route wasn't working, but I encountered so much friction and resistance along the way. People would literally get offended and act as if I told them the moon was made of cheese when I said I didn't want to go the traditional route. But as time went on, I watched firsthand my decisions become validated, and gradually people went from thinking I was crazy to thinking I was cool for ditching the traditional route. I remember when I first started YouTube, people thought it was a joke. A lot of people didn't even know you could make money off it back then, but today being a YouTuber is considered cool. Of course, it is hard to make it in these alternative lifestyles, as I'm sure everyone will tell you. But at this point, so what? It's damn hard to make it via the traditional route now, too. And even if you do, you won't really be happy anyway. You guys are still young, you're already off to a great start. And in a world where everyone hates you, you've done exceptionally well for yourselves. Don't let society shame you for giving up on it when they're the ones who chased you out in the first place. So whatever you decide to do in the future, I'm sure you'll figure it out. Thanks for watching today's video. It took quite a lot of time and effort to make it, so if you enjoyed it, a like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated.